All we see is the black and white, black and white, black and white. All we see is the black and white, black and white, black and white. All we see is the black.
Welcome everybody to episode 3. Today is a very special episode. We've got Mr. Prince Mhlanga and Richard MacCallum, who matriculated in 2007 and 1979 respectively, to talk about the ongoing and virtually complete Tsessebe project that we have undergone as an Old Boys Association. Prince is the head housemaster and Richard is a passionate Tsessebe Old Boy, just to take us through the whole project, and as usual we'll speak to them about Jeppe and some of their aspirations for the school and where they find themselves at the moment. So over to you, Chad.
James, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having us.
So Mr. MacCallum, I'd like to start with you. Obviously when I was looking for questions for today's podcast, I came across the highlights that our Jeppe Boys alumni page did on you and your story. And one of the quotes that really stood out for me was, you said, "Jeppe has been my family for over 50 years. So I just wanted to know, what in your mind creates that distinction from Jeppe not being a school but a family?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Prince, thanks, my brother. Thanks.
MacCallum.
Very nice being here.
Likewise.
And thank you very much for the invitation. It's actually quite a nice story. Back in 1972, my older brother Lawrence and I, at the ages of, he was 9, I was 9, he was 10. Our mom sent us to boarding school. We started our Jeppe journey back in the Tsessebe House in Jeppe Primary School. And so in 2022, that was actually the 50 years that you're referring to. And both Lawrence and I, in that year, decided, it's quite cool in the 50th year, combined together, there's 100 years, that we should get a little bit more involved with Jeppe, and more specifically with Tsessebe. So humble beginnings, single parent family, and that's basically where both our Jeppe journeys started.
100%, awesome. So moving to you, please speak to your transition. We're doing a bit of research on you as well, so don't feel too left out.
No worries.
And I learned that you were actually a day boy during your time in the black and white.
Yes.
Coming back to the boarding house as an educator and as a hostel master, what was that transition like for you, and what were some of the key changes that you realized within a Jeppe boy schedule as a boarder?
Thanks, Chad. I think one of the biggest things that I used to witness when I was at Jeppe, I think we'll go from when I was still at Jeppe boy, is that hostel boys had the opportunity to be more invested in the school than the day boys had. Boys had the opportunity to be on the field at certain times for them, which ultimately made them more invested in the school. And that's always been my dream. I always wanted to be a boy that can have more time in the boarding house to actually invest or try to be more invested in the school. And the transition was actually a very, very, I'd say, eye-opening, because when I first moved in here, I was under the guidance of Mr. Wallendorf, who was a senior hostel master. And to see the routine that the boys had and the discipline that was instilled in the boarding house was actually one of the things that made me realize why, as cliched as the saying may go, that the hostel is the backbone of the school, why indeed the hostels are the backbone of the school. Because when you look at the differences between the day boy houses and the hostels, is that the schedule that they have allows them to actually make sure that they get optimal from the school and from the boardings.
100%. So going back to your post, you said Jeppe and several housemasters who were mentors played an important role in my youth and guided me into the person I am today. Could you just speak to some of these mentors and perhaps some of the lessons that you hold so dear?
Sure. So single parent, as I mentioned, so it was just my mom bringing Lawrence and I up. And I suppose, as a young guy, you're always looking for father figures somehow. Let the cat out the bag be known, I was quite the naughty guy. My brother, he was more the academic and probably better disciplined with his studies at school. So you kind of like latch onto a couple of father figures. The first one was Sydney Guff Thomas in PT, and then Rob Healy after that in my primary school days. But as soon as I arrived at Tsessebe, there was only one guy that stood out head and shoulders, and that was Warren Beaky Bowden. And he sorted me out quite quickly in those first few years, and one of the things that he taught me was discipline. and never give up, just perseverance the whole time. And he was one of the guys from a leadership point of view that identified something in me, had some faith in me, and gave me that opportunity. Everyone needs a bit of a break, got an opportunity. And then the other two who were very influential was the first team rugby coach in 78 and 79, Jerry Vernos, better known as Bushy to most of the guys. And then my industrial arts teacher, Vivian Richards, better known as Granny. We had all these nicknames for the guys. Those were the sort of influencing masters. Maybe some of the old boys will remember those guys right throughout. There were others, but those are the ones that stood out for me. Yeah.
And Rich, do you think anything has changed in the years since you've been here in terms of the role that some of these mentors play in some of these boys' lives?
Yeah. Well, back in the 70s, most old boys remember, completely different world. There was different ways of bringing youngsters in line. These days, with my experience of working in the hostel, you have to deal with these young guys in a completely different way, and it's far from the days of corporal punishment. It's more from a consultancy point of view, and probably from a psychological point of view, winning the youngsters over. I admire guys like Prince Mhlanga and Dale Jackson in terms of the ways that they've got to the hearts of the youngsters these days to get the best out of them, both academically as well as from the sporting or extramural environment. Yeah.
100%. So, Mr. Mhlanga, I just wanted to ask, when it comes to a boarder's schedule, you identified that, Jeppe, as a boarder, it's your opinion that Jeppe is in a position to optimally benefit a boy. I just wanted to know, what do you think are some of the key features within a boarding or a boarder's schedule that allow him to...
I think one of the things that actually stood out for me the most was the routine. I think working with boys, as Mr. MacCallum has alluded to, working with boys is a very, very difficult, especially at this day and age, where gone are those days if someone gets out of line, they get hiding. Whereas now you have to allow boys to be themselves, And one of the things that you realize over and over is that having a very, very stringent routine allows boys to seldom break the laws, because you know where they are, you know how they do things, or you know where they're supposed to be at a certain time, which makes it easier after a long period of time to actually get them into the habit of doing things. As soon as boys don't have sort of like a routine in their schedule and have more free time in their hands, boys being boys will always get up to mischief. So the routine and the schedule of boarding has allowed boys to understand that you optimize the amount of time in a certain way. So when you wake up in the morning, you have to make sure you're ready for inspection, ready for breakfast. You come in the afternoon, you need to make sure you're ready for all out before the masters come in. So it allows boys to have a routine where ultimately in the long run allows them to better plan their lives and better plan their days.
I've found, certainly I was a Tsessebe old boy, and I found that rigidity during those 5 years has translated into my life. Everything must be on time and must be organized, and I found that if I don't have that rigidity, my world is upside down. Yeah. It's not always, I suppose, always right, but that rigidity, I'm not sure how you feel, Rich. I'm sure very similar. We lived to a bell for many years, and the speed at which I eat, so I could get seconds, was impacted by Tsessebe. The time of which we used to line up here, and I may have didn't mention, but we were sitting in the Tsessebe prep room. We were only allowed in at 5 o'clock. We used to sprint and get hot water, because by 20 past 5 there was no hot water. So you were enjoying a nice Wim Hof method shower, if that was the case. But that routine, do some of the boys still resist it, or do you think that it is something that is...
Well, let me tell you this, John. One thing back in my day, you would always have hot water because the new boys made the boilers.
Okay.
So we had coal boilers back in these days, where these days it's much better modernized.
Yes.
They've got gas. But certainly I concur 100% with you in terms of routine that was set in, and it did, in my instance as well, have a major effect on how my life and working in the corporate world was, and being on time, making sure things get done, deadlines. So yes, it certainly did have an influence. But in saying that, when I look at the youngsters in the hostel these days, it's almost, the world is a different place, but it's also a better place for the boarders at the moment. So the way Prince and his team get into the heads of the youngsters is a complete different dynamic in way they got back, certainly in my days, in the 70s. Maybe not in the later years, but certainly in the 70s, that was the way.
Absolutely. I think that's the other thing, is that the old school boarding house methods can't be applicable to the boarding house this time. So one thing I do find, just to go back to your question, Mr. Hurvitz, is that the systems, so with the transition of boarding life, it's been a whole lot easier with the introduction of Tsessebe House, because then that allows the boys that come into the various older hostels to know what boarding house is about. So that makes the transition of new boys into the hostel space much smoother than it was back in the day. And the resistance that you get, funny enough, is around this time of the year, where the matrics now start getting the prelims and start writing the final matric exams, and they're obviously now over the routine of being in a boarding house, and they start to develop, they start being more eager to see what's in the outside world. So it's not really malicious or blatant, but boys start arriving late for breakfast, which is obviously, it ultimately impacts a snowball effect on other things, where the ladies have to come in and make sure that the boarding house is ready for lunch. So we have those little issues, but it's really nothing hectic. It's just at this time of the year, then we call them in, read them the right act, and then we're back to normal. But it tends to happen. So for the longest, I think I've been here now for 12 years, for the duration that I've been here, we do experience that little resistance from the matrics as soon as they get to a point where they start getting the matric numbers and writing the prelims. Some of them now are actually 18 and have their own cars. So now try to get car keys and say to them, listen, you're still part of the boarding house until you leave here on the last day. So those are some of the difficulties you experience during this time, but it's never ever something that happens throughout the whole year.
Well, maybe to give you some confidence, I don't think that has changed, certainly in our years. I think the only difference is that guys are waiting to be 18 to drive cars. No, in those days, guys were driving at 14, 15, no problem.
100%. And I was head of house at Tsessebe, and just adding on to your point, Mr. Mhlanga, I completely agree. I think Tsessebe is the perfect environment and the perfect introduction to the boarding lifestyle, because it really does. And I think it builds a camaraderie between your year, because it's just you and the boarders that in your class. So
yeah, I think the other thing, Chad, is that people don't understand how daunting it is for a kid that comes from a primary school that he used to go home every day to mom and dad, or used to go home to an environment that he's used to. And now he's been put into an environment where there's 18 or 19-year boys that, by virtue of their size, is automatically intimidating to him. So Tsessebe has managed to obviously narrow that gap, where guys now know the routine, know how the procedures work, know how the routines work. So by the time they get here, they've already kind of like eased into the boarding habit and the boarding routine. So the transition between the guys from primary school into high school has been way smoother.
And something I noticed during my time as a matric at Tsessebe was that initial period is the hardest. Leaving home, you're so homesick. But I'll never forget when I was in grade 8, there was a moment where we all came like 2 weeks into the boarding house and we were also homesick and we were all crying on our pillows. But you realize that the guy underneath you on your at the bottom of your bunk bed is doing the exact same thing. Yes. And it creates this camaraderie that we're all the same, we're all going through this together. So
I want to just find out, and I want to ask on behalf of all boarders before Tsessebe arrived, what happens with skips now? Is there anything like a skip or a skivvy? Because when I was in standard 6, which is now grade 8, we arrived into this big world. I remember, I won't mention the name, but my mom baked me some shortbread, and that first weekend, the matric sat on my bed looking at me eating my whole, and I became a skipper. We became great friends afterwards. But is there still that type of...
I think just to answer that, Mr. Hurvitz, it's no. There's no skivvies or skippies. But what we do have is that, especially with our grade 11, so we have what we call a mentorship program. So when the guys arrive in grade 8, they get assigned a mentor from the respective senior hostels. And that guy will stay with the guy until he goes into Tsessebe. So it allows him to have sort of like a big brother that makes him understand the ropes and makes him understand the ways of life in bigger hostels. So I don't think it's necessarily a skivvy per se. It's just that it's someone that they have in their corner when things like that happen. I mean, skivvies was ultimately seen as a form of bullying because guys were forced to do things that were not allowed to be done nowadays. So now we allow a mentor system where guys actually have a brother, and as soon as they go into the Tsessebe house, they've got a brother that then when they go into a bigger hostel, that guy's in matric, and it makes the transition easier as now he's got a big brother in matric.
So Mr. Mhlanga, going back to your point, I definitely think that this mentorship program is so beneficial to the boys, but there were definitely a few snacks that went missing. They had snacks in Tsessebe House due to unknown circumstances, so that didn't change, Jonathan, in case you're wondering. Mr. MacCallum, I just wanted to know, you spoke about these 50 years and you said that was a big recognition or a realization for you that you wanted to go back and work with Jeppe. Could you just speak more to the thought process and what were some of your thoughts at that time?
Yeah, I think like most old boys, and I was the rugby guy, I would try not miss the derby game, the Jeppe Cares. Back in those days we only played one game. And that was kind of, for a very lengthy period of time, my only sort of association back with the old school. I can't even recall, I mean, my mates from 79, whether we actually had a 10-year or a 20-year reunion. And in 2009, it was our 30th reunion, and a couple of good guys, David Pike and Sean Smith, really got going, and we put together a reunion for 79ers, and we had a fantastic time. We had Warren Bowden as our guest, and it was just off the back of Cares thumping Jeppe at Cares, and I was pretty perturbed about just the way that the boys behaved, and I said, this is just, it's not right. So it's one of those things, you know, you either sit on the sidelines and make commentary or get involved. So I wrote an email to Anton Dempsey, the headmaster at that stage, and didn't receive a reply initially, and then our reunion came, and at the reunion Dale was also a guest speaker there, and he got up and spoke to us predominantly about the Theo Jackson scholarship and then also the passion that he showed for the school. And I immediately went up to him and I said to him, okay, this is it. How do I get involved? And within a week, Dale arranged a cup of tea in Anton Dempsey's office, and one thing led to the other. I was still in the corporate world and I could influence bursaries to young students. And like most everybody, I was working still, so I was still committed to my corporate life. And then slowly but surely, Lawrence and I, we, coming from humble single-parent beginnings, saw exactly what Dale and Craig Jackson were doing with regards to the Theo Jackson Scholarship Fund, and we got involved with that. So that was predominantly my involvement. And then slowly but surely, with another good friend, Vic Vermeulen, we got more involved in school. Vic, being an old boy quadriplegic motivational speaker, I started sponsoring a few talks that he did at the schools, mainly before the day before the derby against Cares. And then I took early retirement, and when I took early retirement out of the corporate world, I approached Dale and I said, I'll have time, I don't want to sit still, and I want to give more back. And it was then that Dale invited me to the Tsessebe Hostel just to come have a look at the sleeping accommodation of guys, and I was pretty shocked at the state of what was going on. I said, okay, this is my opportunity to give back and to try and make a difference. But then COVID came. So COVID kind of delayed us by a year, 18 months or so. And then I embarked on a project which was predominantly Tsessebe and the renovations of Tsessebe Hostel. So I see it as a privilege. I mean, a wonderful opportunity, as a privilege to have been able to. And I never thought, and Dale will attest to this, I never thought that starting the journey with what was to sponsor one dormitory, which my brother and I were keen to doing, how it's resulted into what we've got today. Exciting, lekker, nice journey. Always wonderful to be able to give back, and understanding why you're giving back and making the difference and what the cause is all about. Yeah. So, a bit long-winded, but that's encapsulates how I got involved. Yeah.
So, what in your mind, having this association with the boarding house, what separates Tsessebe in particular from other boarding houses in your mind?
Oh, difficult one. Now, look, all the boarding houses are fantastic. I mean, let that be known. The spirit amongst the boarders, which, you know, was stated that it's the backbone of the school. That's because the guys can't go home on the weekend. It's sport, you know. So, I mean, there's fantastic camaraderie within the hostels, as Prince alluded to, but there's also an immense amount of competitiveness between. I think that's kind of, when I saw the one dormitory at Tsessebe, I think that sparked a little bit of my old Tsessebe competitiveness, and I said, okay, we've got to get ahead of the other guys. And I know there's some really good, influential, well-networked guys in the other hostels. I said, okay, we've got to try all the different angles. And I give some credit to my Boet. You know, he immigrated over 30 years ago to the States. So he's a chemical engineer in New Jersey. And a lot of the stuff, even to today, with as we've renovated one room to the next, etc., I'll always send him photos and bounce ideas off him, because I need that engineering mind just to give me a couple of more ideas on the creative side. And that's also to a large degree sparked the competitiveness in Lawrence as well. So, and there's a whole bunch of other old boys, very generous old boys, that have helped, and we could never do what we've done in Tsessebe without the generosity. And some of the guys, some of them didn't even spend full 5 years at Tsessebe. Some spent 2-3 years at Tsessebe. But there's, I suppose, with the same with the other boarding houses, there's a link that you had back to your, it's not your boarding house, it was your home for a period of time that you were here. Yeah.
I think completely agree with Mr. MacCallum. I think that's the one thing that Tsesebe's been very fortunate, is that you can see the amount of passion that the old boys had for this, they have for this place. I think that's one of the differentiating factors is that, is that the passion that the old boys have for this place is absolutely amazing. Most of them would come here and you just listen and how they reminisce on the days that when they were still here, and you look at them and you understand their love and passion, and you see it in their eyes that this was a place that at one stage in my life meant a lot to me, and for them to actually, like you said, Mr. MacCallum, for them to actually then come back and make it a place where now it would mean more to the other generation that we have today is absolutely amazing.
I will just say, maybe from as a Tsessebe old boy, I mean a massive, credit to you, Richard, who've driven the Tsessebe project with Tsessebe old boys. We can only hope that we have other old boys of other hostels to drive it. And I think that needs to be known, that a lot of this was a generous, from a time perspective, and donations from Tsessebe old boys as well. And I think you always need a driver. So what Tsessebe is today is largely credited to you guys. It's a different place from when I was here, certainly. And the boys, they won't know how good they have it until if they had to look back. So, I think a large portion of what this is a credit to you guys, absolutely. So let's not underestimate the impact that you guys have had, not only driving it, but then going to go speak to guys and making sure that that passion it remains instilled in these guys.
I think just to reiterate to that, I think one thing that Mr. MacCallum used to love hearing the most is when old boys arrive here. And it's like, oh, this looks exactly the same how it did when I was here. And I think that was one of the things that when we spoke, myself and Mr. MacCallum were like, that's not a good thing. I don't think that's what we want to hear when old boys arrive. We don't want to hear old boys arrive say, old boy of 1972 is like, this looks exactly the same when I was here, and it's 2024. So I think it's always been the generosity of old boys wanting this place to still be the backbone, together with other boarding houses, to still be the backbone of Jeppe, has absolutely made sure that Tsessebe is what it is today.
Prince is absolutely right. Some of the comments that come from old boys is, geez, it still looks like a prison. And you could either look at it that way and say, oh, well, that is what it is, or say, all right, well, let's do something about it.
Yeah.
That gives me the opportunity to speak to that individual that says, help me. Let's do something about it. But thank you for the accolades. But you can never do something of this nature by yourself. And
absolutely.
If you don't have a good partner like I have in Prince, in allowing me some carte blanche within the hostel, and also running ideas by him, testing it, and also getting the input of the boys. That's not discredit that. They have contributed tremendously, and I've always tried to engage with the matric boys. I mean, we're in the third year of the renovations, and just to get some of their ideas out of it. But you've got to do it on a team effort basis, and the JBA obviously has allowed me to just go ahead and do it. But behind the scenes, on the floor, it's been Prince Mhlanga allowing me to do that. And when you talk about the other hostels, there's got to be some passionate guys out there, old boys, and who could link up with the head of hostels of Sable and Oroby and Droste, just to get the thing going.
Absolutely.
It's got to be.
And I think it's a message to everybody who's watching, is that we've got the blueprint. Richard's got the blueprint. He's happy to help and assist. There should be nobody who's going to go into this blind. We've paid the school fees. We've done everything that we need to do. And Rich, you've said it on many occasions that you're more than happy to help anybody, anybody who's prepared to help. Just
Tsessebe boys always help. That's fine.
I've got to distance myself. I have to remain objective. But just one last question before we get into the rest of it, and it's just a yes or no. If we had, as Jeppe boys, as Jeppe as a school, if we had facilities that could cater to 1,000 boarders, do you think we would be able to fill it up?
Without a doubt, yes.
If we had the facility,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay, cool.
I think that will do the school the world of justice. I think that could work. Don't know the practicality of it.
No, look, I'm not suggesting. It was just a simple question.
Yes,
to ask,
no,
we look at
absolutely.
some of our contemporaries in this world. Some of the more the private guys. It's 100% boarding rate.
Yes, absolutely.
We speak always a lot about. We would never want to have day boys miss out on the experience, and I'm not suggesting that we would ever go down that road. But if there was opportunity for us to build another hostel, another 2 hostels, whatever it is, or expand hostels, how do we get from the 40%, just under 40%, to 60%? It would be in my view, it'd be a change. But I also came out of this world, so I'm probably a little bit biased.
Yeah, well, I'm an RB boy, so I'm feeling a bit intimidated with all the inter-house athletics titles around me. But going back to what you said, Ms. Mhlanga, I was class of 2020, and just walking around today, taking some images for the podcast, I was blown away. Because I remember when I was in RB, we got a PlayStation 4 that the terminally boarders could play on the weekend, and that was like the big hit. You guys have an indoor soccer court. I'm like, this is crazy.
One of the mandates that I set for myself is that I think, like Mr. MacCallum said, guys would arrive here and be like, and I had a lot of friends that were in boarding. Most of my guys that I played first team rugby with were in boarding. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I do, one of the mandates, was that to create a home away from home. If you look at the boarding now, it's more a homey space for the boys. They actually can identify in the sense that it doesn't look like
a prison.
For lack of a better term. So I think doing that will allow boys to enjoy the boarding space more, and ultimately will encourage more boys to come to boarding, because it then changes the narrative of hostel is this prison that guys don't have freedom. Guys just do things according to routine. Where now guys can get an area like this to just chill and be their own. And again, we've through the help of Mr. Tsessebe House, we've got a beautiful garden that the boys themselves want to work at, because they see the amount of work that the old boys have done. And now every weekend when you see Mr. Tsessebe House in the garden assisting, the boys want to do it because they know ultimately it benefits the house as a whole. Yeah. So the other thing is seeing boys take pride in the house really goes a long way. Now us ensuring the longevity of all the contribution that's been done and upgrades that have been done in boarding.
Yeah, I think what Prince is saying is Tsessebe boys don't want to go home. they're rather stay.
There's stuff that they would.
Yeah.
No, 100%.
Sure. Looking back at your history with the school, you're both first team rugby players. I just want to know, looking back at the fantastic rugby season that Jeppe's had in the last year, has to be mentioned at every opportunity. I just want to know, what were some of the key lessons that the rugby field taught you, and what was perhaps your greatest memory in the black and white?
MacCallum, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was fortunate to play most of the 78 season and then the whole of the 79 season.
Scrum off.
I was going to say hooker, but I'll go with that.
Scrum off is a compliment nowadays.
Funny enough, I was in 78, I was a flank. We had a good 8th man. So I was on the flank, and then in matric year I moved to 8th man. And I was able to carry on playing rugby for 10, 11 years thereafter, with the military as well as club rugby. But just especially, it might have even started in under 13 ranks, to be quite honest. The discipline, never miss a practice. I suppose passion, beautiful game, loved rugby. And it was as a young guy. Prince has spoken about the young teenage guys, lots of testosterone. It was a release as well, in terms of being able to get there. And you got the sports fields right here on your doorstep. You couldn't wish for anything better. So, and then idolizing some of the first team guys, when you're a youngster, you stand at 6 and 7, and aspiring one day I'd like to get up into that. But it does take every now and again a trigger. And I think in that 78 year in Jerry Vernos, he was also a student housemaster at Tsessebe. So we would I received the passion from him. We talk about Springbok rugby, old Frick du Preez, old rugby players the whole time. So the whole time he was building that up within a group of guys, I was just fortunate to be one of those guys. And then by the time I hit the matric year, we knew, and we had a good team in 79, we knew we can turn the corner on this. And we did. We had a fantastic season. I've still got all the scores from that little black book. Who scored what tries, conversions, penalties, etc. And it created a bond, that almost that first 15 or 20 guys, as the players were in that year. But, just basic things like discipline, camaraderie, amongst certainly passion. And it's not only this year that we've had a fantastic first team game. If I see any kid in black and white on a sports field, also not just rugby, immediately that competitiveness comes out. But also the sportsmanship of it. You don't win every game. And you learn how to accept defeat and how to get stronger and come back into it. So a lot of those disciplines, I actually got more out of the rugby, in terms of life-changing events, because I was a lazy student, so I wouldn't focus on my studies. Whereas other youngsters will get that discipline in studying. I got it from the sports field. And that grounded me. And loved it for my senior career, and I was able to travel extensively overseas and play rugby and enjoy it, make friends for life. And still to this day, I can pick up the phone and phone Robbie Blom, who was my first team captain, and sit around a table, have a cup of coffee or a beer, and it's as if we just got off the field from the last sports game in 79. So it's a link of a combination. I think the main link is you're a Jeppe boy, so you got that black and white DNA in your system. But then just the sport that it is and how it teaches you discipline. I'm sure it does it for the hockey and the cricket and the water polo guys as well.
Sure. I think just to jump on, Mr. MacCallum, it's very difficult to now answer the question after you've took everything out. But I think the one thing that stood out the most is the brotherhood. I think having played first team, a bit in grade 11, and ultimately cementing my place in grade 12, you don't realize, as the headmaster says quite often, you regret more the things that you didn't do at school than the things you did. And the relationships that you establish playing rugby and allowing guys into that space, those are everlasting relationships. I still have friends that still laugh at the fact that you got bounced at this game many years ago, because that's the one thing that you guys have in common, that you've established that thing. And like Mr. MacCallum has alluded to, distance doesn't take that away. You guys can not see or speak to each other for about 15, 20 years, and you guys come back and it's as if that you guys were here together. So the relationships and the brotherhood that the sport in its entirety allows you to form is absolutely amazing. The one thing that I remember from my year is that we obviously didn't have pre-season training like the guys that do today. We would train rugby during the summer sport, and the headmaster at the time, Mr. Ted, said the guys that play summer sports will play cricket, and all the first team rugby players for pre-season sport ended up playing first team cricket, and it was such a wonderful thing to do because none of those guys could play cricket. I can still remember against Parktown where one of my friends who's currently playing for the Griffins, actually still currently playing the Griffins Curry Cup team, bowled about 8 balls in 1 over. And for us, that was what it was about. And those are memories that no one will ever take away from you. And it's something that you get the opportunity to cherish every time you guys come together as the brothers.
My favorite thing about listening to some war stories of even first team or second team or third team is how over the years the stories get a little bit embellished. Like to embroider a couple of the details. A guy will say, I bounced him. The story becomes, I bounced him. He rolled 100 times, and then he, So it's
absolutely.
So moving into the last two questions, this one's a bit of a funnier one. How would you explain Jeppe to a partner? I find it quite hard to explaining to my girlfriend, the passion and the pride that comes with the school. How is it? How would you do that?
Sure.
Give me some advice.
Okay, I think I'll go first because mine is fairly new. So I just recently got engaged and actually met my partner. She was a maths teacher here. And one of the games, I'm not sure which one it was, we were sitting there, I think it was a Cares game, and I started crying. And she looked at me and said, "Why are you crying for a school like this?" And to me, it made sense for me to cry because the emotions, the time, the tears that have been invested in this place for us to see the place doing so well, it just warms your heart as an old boy, you know. And all those memories and all those flashbacks where we as a school weren't regarded as a rugby playing school, we as a school were regarded as this underperforming school. To see all the hard work and blood, sweat, tears come together and see those results was really something that something to behold. And when I sat there next to Mafia and I started crying, for the life of her, she couldn't understand what was going on. So she at least understands it because she's been part of. She knows what the rugby game is about. She knows the week building up to one of the biggest derbies in schoolboy rugby in South Africa. So she at least has that background knowledge to it. But explaining to her if she had not had exposure to this would be a difficult thing to do.
I think you've set yourself up for life. If you don't cry when she walks down the aisle.
No, she mentioned that, Mr. She said to me, like, clearly you've got plenty of tears to waste, so if I walk down the aisle and you don't cry,
100%.
it's a story for another day.
I think if I can just add to that, I've been married 25 years. Got married a bit late in life. And initially, you know, when I'd come to rugby games, my wife would think I'm nuts. You know, she's a Mondi or high graduate, but she'd think I'm absolutely nuts. And the turning point is, I think, when she saw what was happening at the hostel here. Because that's how perhaps she sees the influence of the changing and the passion on lives. But I don't think till today she can't understand why I'll sit in the stands behind the poles and go nuts or get goose flesh when the first team runs on the field and I'm reminiscing about the day and everything. She doesn't understand that side, but she certainly does understand about making a difference and changing lives and everything.
How have you tried to
I was
explain
actually
it?
going to say that now. So I was saying to Louise, one of the stories that comes to me, like really in the front of my mind, was when we played Uffies in my grade 11 year, and we had never beaten Uffies, and we were winning the game. I'm sure you can remember, sir. Until literally the last, like literally the time was up, and then they had a line out, and they were wasting time. Change of line out, and the left wing scored a try. And I'll never forget, you know, as a boarder, you don't tend to share emotion. You're very like, so you're on other gents, you know, but I'll still remember turning around, having tears in my eyes and seeing 200, 300, 400 other boys who also had tears in their eyes. And to me, that was, you cannot explain, Jeppe, to your partner.
I think
that has to be
that's
experienced.
That's the thing, is that we as old boys saw that game as an opportunity that many years ago we wouldn't be able to even compete against the likes of Afis. And for us to narrowly lose in the manner that we did, it obviously brings those emotions that something is happening at school.
But in the
something
same
great
breath,
is happening.
it wasn't just the rugby players who were
Exactly.
crying. It was the Orientarian people. It was the
absolutely,
guy
yes.
who do debating. It was because we emphasizing rugby, but I think going to an all-boys school, you understand rugby is a metaphor for the school
flagship
itself.
sport, absolutely.
And
I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's just the emotion. You get so engulfed in the emotions when something like that happens, because you then start to see, as Mr. MacCallum, all the efforts that have been happening behind the background coming into the fore. And when something like that happened, wow.
But we still expect tears on the wedding day, Prince. You're not getting out of that.
I promise you, I'll definitely do that. I've got mates that are chefs, so I'll ask them to just chop some onions there to make sure that there's tears in the eyes.
So to end off, we went off with the same question on our Jeppe podcast, and the question is simple, but I think profound, and it's, what is the greatest thing that Jeppe has taught you?
Probably just remain humble. Just be humble and be nice, man. It's nice to be nice. No one must say by doing something good for somebody else it doesn't make you feel good. I personally only do what I do at Jeppe because yes, it does make me feel good and proud to be a Jeppe boy, proud to be a Tsessebe boy, proud to be able to give back in the way. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Mr. Mhlanga?
Sure. What has Jeppe taught me? I think just be yourself. You know, you're coming in an environment where it's a melting pot of different cultures, different races, different personalities, and at this day and age, it's very, very difficult to be something that you're not because of the surroundings that you have. So it's very, very important for you to be true to yourself. And the nice thing about being in an environment like Jeppe is that people will love you for who you are. You understand? Because you understand that people come from different backgrounds, different nationalities. So just be yourself and embrace who you are and make the most out of your time while you're still here. Because you'll be your time here, as long as it seems like 5 years is long, 5 years flies by, and before you know it, you're out of here and you're out in the big bad world. So make the most out of your time while you're still here, and be kind and be yourself. Be true to yourself.
Cool. Well, firstly, just a big thanks to you guys. I know that it's time out of your days, and it's we certainly appreciate the context that you've been able to give to not only your journeys as Jeppe boys and old boys, but your journey as head of house and the project manager, and making sure that not only Tsessebe but all of the other hostels are taken care of in a way that we can leave it in a better place. So just with a lot of gratitude, we want to thank you guys for being here, and well done, Chad, again. And yeah, thank you until the next episode.
Thank you very much, Mr. Host. Thank you.
Yes,
MacCallum, keep on. Thank you very much.